It is a pleasure for us to welcome you at a workshop entitled What the CEFR Can Do for Writing Test Development with our speaker, Professor Dr. Claudia Harsch from University of Bremen, Germany. This morning we are going to have Professor Dr. Claudia Harsch talk about what the CEFR can do for writing test development. This workshop is held by Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Indonesia. Next, for the welcoming remark, I would like to invite the Vice Director of the International Language Institute, Faculty of Humanities, Ibu Harumi Manik Ayu, to come to the stage.
Thank you very much for coming on time. Today we're so lucky because we have a very special guest, a prominent scholar in the field of language testing, Professor Dr. Claudia Harsch. And today, on behalf of the Faculty of Humanities, I would like to say welcome to all of you who are representing your language centers and universities. So allow me to briefly introduce Professor Dr. Claudia Harsch. She is the current academic and managing director of the Foreign Language Center for Higher Education in Bremen. And then she's also a former president of European Association for Language Testing and Assessment. And today is actually the last day for Claudia to be in Indonesia. It's because she's been here since 10 days ago. She's been very busy being a plenary speaker for the TAFLIM conference and facilitating workshops in various cities in Indonesia. And today we're going to learn from her about what the CEFR can do for writing test development. So without further ado, please once again give an applause for Professor Dr. Claudia Harsch.
Competences and feasible ways to foster and assess these skills. Alternative assessment approaches such as dynamic assessment, qualitative methods of constructing language tests and teaching material, the development and validation of tools for educational evaluation, or the assessment of writing skills. Claudia is the current president of the European Association of Language Testing and Assessment. Without further ado, I'd like to invite our speaker, Professor Dr. Claudia Harsch, to come to the stage.
Can you hear me like this?
Yes.
Then I better not use a microphone, otherwise it's going to get complicated. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cecilia, for having invited me and taking so good care of me until now. It's a pleasure being here, and I feel honored that we can work together here today. And we'll make it interactive. It's a big group, but I'm not going to stand here for 3 hours talking. I have a bit of input for you, and then there's loads of tasks where you can work in smaller groups. And if you need a break, just do it at your leisure, because I heard you have another workshop at 1 o'clock. So you're quite busy, even more busy than I am. All right, what is it that we're going to look at today? We first look a little bit at the background of assessment, where you are and where we are all coming from. Then I'd like to introduce the CEFR. Has anybody worked with the CEFR so far? Hands up. Who knows the CEFR? Okay. Oh, excellent. So if I'm telling you something you already know, let me know, then we move on. And then we do a lot of practical work where we develop tasks for writing. So, first of all, how do you teach writing? And how do you assess writing? And are there any ways of assessment which enhance learning? So I would like you to talk to your neighbor, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. What is writing in your context? How is it taught? How is it assessed? How do your students learn from your assessment? Because then you can tell me so I know where you are. Okay? Take a few minutes with your neighbors.
usually don't have it fast, right?
I see. I think the difference is the program. For them to return, so once they have they apply, and then give feedback, and offline, and they submit the first draft, they still have to attach. I think writing 1, 2, and 3, we usually still rely on paper. For the higher level, then I don't know. More effective.
They consider scores right away. Oh, there is also this. You can also write notes. That's one of the things that I was looking for. Like I can just click on the scores very easily instead of writing them on the paper. Or what I did in the previous semester was I copied the whole rubric and then attached the rubric to their paper. Then that would lead to a lot of activity.
I send them some copy for the rubric, and then when I give feedback, I give abbreviation for the first time. Sometimes grammar, something like
So, let me know, how do you teach writing? How is it taught in Indonesia, in your context? Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. Well, in my experience, my writing class was in a computer laboratory. So every student will be sitting in front of the computer, and we start working, and everyone can comment, can see each other's work.
Ah, yeah, like on the screen.
Yes, and I can pick one and show it on the screen.
Wow.
And everyone can also see the other's work. So they can learn from each other, and they can give feedback to each other. So it helped me a lot with the grammar part, vocabulary part. So they can also give feedback to friends about word choice or grammatical problems. It helps a lot. Or ideas, even idea development.
Excellent. So you work online on a computer, which is very authentic.
Yeah.
Hardly anybody writes on paper nowadays.
No more paper.
You
no
work
more paper.
online, so you can show on the screen what's going on. You see the writing processes.
Yeah.
You can focus on different aspects. You can give feedback. The students can give feedback. So peer assessment happening all in real time.
Yeah.
Wow, that's excellent. Cool. Who else would like to talk about how they teach writing? Yes, please. Yes, please.
So in our discussion, in this context, we are focusing on the academic phase, and the approach is more structured based. So starting from the smallest elements like business statement, sentence level, paragraph level, until the whole phase. So and also we are introducing some language markers and features, and also functions. But then in Vania's case, it's more genre-based. So she's introducing some models, model essay, and then the students are going to differentiate what is different between this and that.
So you're already teaching at a very high level. The students are quite proficient then. If you take a genre-based approach, they already know about genres and different text markers and different audiences. Excellent. And then you have a structure-based approach, thesis statement, and how do you develop your argument. So this is already teaching advanced students. Are you all in the university context, teaching university students?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. So we don't have to talk about the beginnings of writing. You're already dealing with...
Actually, even though we are at the university level, but since I taught writing 1, so actually it's a very basic, because the students, most of them, they come from different backgrounds, so we cannot just suddenly judge them at this level. I have to look at their the various backgrounds first and bring everyone to come to the same, at least the same.
Okay, so you have diverse students.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you usually assess your students in their writing? How is assessment done?
And we usually develop rubrics, and let them see the rubric from the beginning, so they work based on the rubric.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
So all the students know the assessment criteria from the beginning?
Yes.
Cool, that's great. And do you look at the products and assess the final written product? Or do you also look at the processes? How do you do that?
By asking them to do multi-tasking.
So you have multi-versions of a text and you can track the changes. Wow, excellent.
That I think for the task that they do in class. But there is also the midterm task and also final task.
And that's product-based then?
Yeah.
So you look at both processes in the classroom and you assess the processes and the products at the end. Cool. What else can I teach you? I think I can go. Perfect. Excellent. So, and I guess from what you have said, peer feedback, you show on screen what is there to learn and improve grammar, structures, vocabulary, genre. So that's the way of giving online feedback so that students can learn. Excellent. Cool. Well, let's see what I still have. I guess it's a lot of summing up, and we are on the same page. Oh, what happened here? Never mind. I like to integrate always the teaching, the learning, and the assessment. And so usually we start with the curriculum, with the goals. Here, with that one. So you have learning outcomes, you have an aim towards which you teach. And this is always the beginning and the end point. And then you go into the teaching. You have lessons plans, materials, the content, the methods. You select those which are appropriate to reach your aims. And then you assess your learners. This is ongoing, as you just said. That happens all the time. You give feedback. Hopefully the students give feedback to each other. Here we go with self and peer assessment, and then based on what you see in the classroom, you may review your teaching. You may go into more depth in certain structures. So this is an ongoing process. The green circle, you do that continuously. The formative assessment. And then, as you said, in the end, you assess the outcomes. You have final or midterm exams. They are summative, they look at what the students already have been doing. And here again, self and peer assessment may come in. The students already know the assessment criteria. They may as well look at their work themselves. Do you have any external tests, or do you develop your own tests? You develop your own? Yes. Sometimes you get external tests from the ministry, sometimes it's your own tests. And then you may evaluate your course effectiveness. Do the students reach the learning outcomes? Do they reach the aims? Or do you have to change something? So this is an ongoing circle. And again, for the evaluation, you may have external accreditation bodies coming in. So they may look at the whole circle. And I guess what we're going to look at in the group work later is where in this cycle you would like to focus your assessment on. Because we're going to work on developing writing tasks later, and you may choose at any of these points that you develop a writing task. It could be formative, process-oriented, it could be summative, product-oriented, so that we just bear in mind this cycle when you decide later which task you want to work on. Any questions so far? Just interrupt me if you have any comments or questions. Yes, please.
Can we copy your material so we don't have to take pictures while you're...
Yes. I will send it all to Cecilia later and she can share with you.
Okay,
Yes, of course.
then we will not take it.
Exactly, then you don't have to focus. You may still take notes wherever you find it interesting, but I'll send this. I'll make it nice and send it over.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Just briefly summing up a bit of good practice in assessment, but I'm sure you have all heard this before. You said that already. You are fair and transparent. You share the assessment criteria with your students. So this is the most important bit. They should know what they're assessed against. So that's already happening. That's fine. And I guess you all know we need to be objective. You said you develop rubrics, so you have guidelines to be objective so that everybody is assessed against the same objectives. And then you use appropriate instruments which are fit for purpose. So I guess your students are prepared for any exams while you're teaching in the classroom. When they go into the final exams, they know what they have to expect. They're familiar. And I guess you use those types of assessment that are fit for their purpose. And we come to a discussion of what types of writing tasks you use in a minute. We look at that in more detail. And I guess reliability and validity are concepts that are familiar. So reliable means that whoever assesses and marks a student comes to the same result. So that we're not using different standards. One of us is more lenient, one is more harsh. Yes, that can happen, but we can moderate and find a fair and objective and reliable score. And valid means that we actually assess those writing skills that we want to assess. So a valid instrument, a valid approach is one, if I want to assess whether my students can write a letter, then I give them a task of writing a letter. In former times, sometimes we ask the students with multiple choice formats whether they know the right form. This tests the knowledge about form, but it doesn't test whether they can write. So that's meant by a valid exam. If you want your students to be able to write, if you want to measure the skill, then they have to do a performance-based assessment. Knowledge-based assessment will not show us whether they can actually write. But I guess that's... Are you all using performance-based assessment for writing? What are the writing tasks you are using in class? What tasks do you use? Just give me some typical tasks, some ideas.
It's really like thesis development, this is topic sentence developments. We start from or outline, producing outline. That's the first task to do. Usually starting from topic sentence and then outlining before they really start writing.
Okay, so they have a planning phase in advance.
Yeah.
So they think a little bit, what's the thesis statement and how do I organize my ideas?
Yes. Yes.
And do they then actually go into writing the...
At the end.
Of the course?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what would be a typical test task? When you think at the final exams, what would be a typical writing test?
Paragraph writing, essay writing.
So they write an essay.
Yeah. It's a short one.
It depends on the level.
Yeah.
What would you use for a lower level? What kind of task would you use for lower level students?
Paragraph writing.
So they would write paragraphs. Would there be a communicative purpose with your tasks? Like what would be the instruction? Write a paragraph on...
They usually should start the audience, you know, who they are going to write to,
yeah.
Something like that, and the topic level of the, consider the audience first, the readers.
So you give the audience?
They have to decide.
Oh, they have to decide?
Have to decide.
Ah, okay.
For the beginner level.
Okay.
Maybe I can share. So I usually thought of a big product that they have to achieve at the end. And then I thought of the processes they have to go through to get to the end. So for example, if the product is writing an essay, then I'm probably, if they have to go through like 5 processes, then I will just break it down to 5 tasks. So building up into the end product.
Yeah.
So,
okay, so that's nice. You guide your students towards the final product. Yes, please.
I think aside from what you have said that we could assess students based on the product, there should also be assessment on knowledge. So sometimes what I do is I combine. So before they do the product, they should master or the knowledge of how to write a good topic sentence and things like that. So normally there's a quiz on that.
Okay.
And then after that, they do the
So this is nice. You build up the knowledge so the students know what they are supposed to do. You teach the processes, how they get there in little steps, and in the end you let the students write so they can show that they can apply the knowledge.
I normally ask them to do the writing in groups first, before they eventually do it.
Excellent. That's excellent. So they get peer assessment, they build up awareness of what is expected, what's good writing. Excellent. That's a very thorough, wholesome approach. And who does the marking?
we do.
You do, not the students. So the final exam is marked by the teachers?
Yeah.
Okay. That's most often the case, especially if there are stakes involved, yes. All right. Then I'd like to share 5 key questions with you when it comes to assessment, which I find quite helpful in guiding our assessment. So the first one would be, why would we want to assess and evaluate at all? If we have a good reason, fine, let's go there. If we're not quite sure why we should assess, maybe we shouldn't go there. I always start with the purpose of the assessment. What's the purpose? What do I want to learn with this assessment? What do my students learn from it? And then, what is assessed and evaluated? What are the constructs? And that's why I kept asking you, is it knowledge? Is it skills? Is it the processes? Is it the product? So always be clear what it is that you want to assess, so that you choose the right instruments and approaches. And then how do we assess and evaluate, and how do we interpret what we assess, and how do we give feedback? Because if the students don't learn from our assessment, if we don't learn from the assessment, then somehow it's not really valid assessment. Somebody has to learn and gain new knowledge about the assessment. Then think of the agents. That's why I kept asking, is it you, is it the students? Who is involved? Who is doing the assessment? Who has the power? And the more power you give to the students, the more autonomous they get, and the more they will learn from it. How is it marked in Indonesia? Do you use a red pen and do you mark the errors? Ina says no. Because for a long time in Germany, that was how marking was done. It wasn't marking, it was correction. So the teachers took the effort of correcting every single mistake. And I kept saying, why do we have to do that? The students are the ones who need to find the errors. We are the ones who guide them towards the errors. We can point out, you have a lot of grammatical errors here, look at these, for example. But if I correct my students' errors, I'm the one learning, not the students. So we have to get the students active. They should be active learners, active agents. Otherwise they won't take on board their errors and be able to correct them.
We usually use the editing symbol.
Ah, that's good. So you just tell them, look here.
Yeah, what's wrong with it?
That's good, yeah. That's good. That's learning-oriented assessment. You can draw the attention to an area where they have to improve, you can tell them what to improve, guide them towards the next steps, but if you do the work for the students, they won't learn. So that's perfect, excellent. And then the final question, what are the consequences? How can we how can we ensure there is benefit either for our teaching or for the students' learning? If there is no positive washback, why should we then assess? And also bear in mind there may be negative consequences. See how you can counteract them, anticipate them. And then just, if you need further, if you wanted further references or further professional associations, there is EALTA that was mentioned earlier. That's the European Association for Language Testing and Assessment. We have guidelines for good practice. It's an open community. You are welcome to become a member, even outside Europe. We have associate members. Membership is for free. We have a lot of resources on the webpage. We do webinars. We have a discussion group going on. We have several special interest groups and an annual conference. So you are invited to become members. We have members from all over the world. And we are mainly an association that aims at teacher development and practitioner development. So you are welcome to join our community. And then there is ILTA, the International Language Testing Associations. They also have a code of ethics and guidelines for practice. And we meet regularly once a year at the LTRC, the Language Testing and Research Colloquium. And that's another good community of practice where you may want to have a look what they offer and whether you want to join. So that is just to point out professional associations that are out there. There is also an Australian one, a New Zealand one. So there are loads of assessment associations if you wanted to be part of a bigger community. Let's come now to the Common European Framework of Reference. A bit of input there, and then we look into actual content of the CEFR. So, why would we want something like a Common European Framework of Reference? These frameworks, they allow the qualitative description of teaching and learning goals. So, if we think of traditional assessment, like I'm thinking back of the German school system, I was given grades, numbers. So I knew whether the teacher thought I was good or not so good, but I never got qualitative feedback. So if we look at such frameworks, they describe what learners can do or are supposed to do at different levels of proficiency. And that gives us a qualitative description of what the students are able to do. And that's more valuable than just a numerical value. So we can interpret what our students are able to do after the assessment much better than only by giving a grade, a number. And we have common reference criteria. If we now want to discuss what are your students able to do at the end of the graduate program? Like, let's look at English language teachers. In-service teachers, they are trained at universities, they have a certain level of English. Now, if I asked you, what level of English do they have when they leave the university? How can we compare that to the level that students in Germany have? How could we describe that? What is it that your students are able to do at the end of their graduate studies? So we could say, well, they have to pass the final exam. Yes. What level is that?
I think most of the time we use the syllabus from the books.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we just follow, because
yes,
there are some levels of the book. So.
Yeah. So we all may follow different books and different syllabi, but at the end of the day, if we want to establish a co-educational program, we would have to look into each other's books and syllabi, and it's going to be a lot of work. So such a framework can actually help if the Germans link their curricula to that framework and you link it to the same framework. We can easily establish a common language, a meta-language, to discuss what our learners are able to do and whether that's compatible. So such frameworks, such as the CEFR, help us actually to communicate across different contexts what our learners are able to do. So this is the Blue Book. It was released in 2001. It has been translated in a lot of languages. It's available as a PDF online. And a few questions here. Do you already use the CEFR? Hands up who already uses the CEFR. What do you do with it? How do you use it? Yes, please.
Because the CEFR gives the descriptors, so we actually can think that those descriptors are the goals for writing or the.
So you adopt the descriptors as your learning goals. Okay, excellent. We're going to look into the descriptors in a minute so that you see a bit more in detail what is in there. So it's already been used here.
Yeah, we come from a language school because at the end of the programs, they take the English exams. So
yeah.
to match the learning goals with the
You are a mind reader, because my next question would have been, what certificates do you use? So there's Cambridge. You teach your students towards taking the Cambridge exams. What other exams and certificates do you use or do you know? IELTS, TOEFL, paper-based, IBT. Is Pearson here as well in Indonesia?
Yes, but it is rarely used.
Oh, okay. Then there's Trinity College London. They also have exams. Are they used in Indonesia? No. They're not used. Okay. I'm just mentioning all the big ones so that it's not just one I mentioned, because I don't work for any of them. So I just want to make sure you heard of all of them. So these are big English exams, international exams, and they have all been aligned to the CEFR. So the test results will also be reported in terms of you are at a B2 or a B1 or a C1 level. So the CEFR has been very influential in that respect. It's not a testing instrument, it's not a teaching method, it is just a descriptive framework, but textbooks have been aligned, tests have been aligned, educational standards have been aligned to the CEFR, so it is used as a common reference point, as a criteria to compare different systems. Let's look a little bit more into what the CEFR is, because there are a few misconceptions about the CEFR I hear, but basically it's a language policy instrument. The Council of Europe is a non-governmental organization in Europe, and it has a language education division, and it wants to promote multilingualism and multiculturalism in Europe so that communication amongst Europeans is enhanced. But this is no longer only in Europe. The CEFR has been used worldwide and it's been noticed worldwide. But basically it's a language policy instrument. It doesn't tell you how to teach or how to assess. It just wants to promote multilingualism. And for that it describes relevant aspects of teaching, learning and assessment. But it does not give you any answers, it does not give you the way, the standard. It actually asks a lot of questions. So if you go into the blue book or the PDF, there will be a lot of questions for you to reflect. Reflect your teaching, reflect the learning situation, the tasks, the curriculum, the assessment. It wants actually to stimulate reflection and discussion. It doesn't give you the answers. You have to find the answers in your context. It facilitates communication and reflection about language learning, teaching and assessment. It provides a common meta-language so that we can talk about what it is our students should be able to do. And it wants to enhance communicative competence and mobility in Europe, but also now worldwide. And it provides a framework to enable comparisons. So this framework is a scale system. And you may all have heard of the different levels. A1, A2, the beginning learners, then they move to B1 and B2. B2 is generally the level that is required to take up university studies, roughly speaking. It becomes academic from B2 onwards. C1 is often required from as a language teacher or taking up PhD studies. C2 is a very competent speaker who can easily interact with native speakers and with non-native speakers and manage all sorts of situations. So this is a proficiency framework on 6 levels of proficiency. And if we talk about the levels, we may also talk about the different aspects of proficiency, because we all know language proficiency is multidimensional. So the CFR has adopted a model of communicative competence which goes back to Canale and Swain, Bachmann and Palmer. So it's modeled on the understanding that we have communicative language activities, communication strategies, and we need communicative language competences like grammar, vocab, orthography, pronunciation. And the language activities, the skills, it's production, reception, interaction, and mediation. And I guess you all know the traditional 4 skills: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And the CFR tries to look at them also from a reception, production, interaction, mediation perspective. And what the CFR also has is a European language portfolio. This is a portfolio where learners can document their learning progress and their learning journey. So they can self-assess, where am I at the beginning of my studies, halfway through, at the end, what products have I produced, what interesting situations have I mastered, did I go abroad, did I go to a special course, so they can document their learning trajectory and showcase what they can do in a language. So this is maybe something interesting if your students, do you use portfolios at all? Yeah. So that could be one part of your assessment at the end, to look at your students' learning trajectories over the course of the studies. And they can document it in a portfolio. So what can the CFR do for us? It can inform learning goals, teaching goals. It can be a basis for curriculum development, for developing educational standards. It can facilitate the constructive alignment of our learning outcomes, our teaching aims, and the assessment. So if the assessment reflects what you've been teaching, and you teach what are the learning outcomes, and your students actually learn what they're supposed to learn, and they're assessed in what they're supposed to learn, then it's a valid cycle, and that constitutes constructive and valid alignment of goals and aims and assessment. And you can use it as a starting point to define your assessment constructs. We're going to look at it in a second. We're going to look at what is writing in the CFR and how does that reflect your understanding of what writing is. We look at some writing tasks that the CFR suggests. And it can inform learner and teacher-oriented assessment. It can inform your rubrics. And what I really like with the CFR is that it sees learner language as authentic language. I don't know how it is conceptualized in Indonesia, but when I was learning languages like 30, 40 years ago at school, I was always being told my errors and this is wrong and you're missing that one and you have to learn that one, and I got really frustrated. The CFR takes a different approach. It talks about what learners can do. So we all know in the beginning learners cannot do much, and most of what they do will be erroneous, but it doesn't matter. Errors are part of the learning process. So the CFR sees learner language as a valid variety of language. At any stage in their learning trajectory, they will commit errors, the learners, but that's fine. So the CFR has statements like, can express themselves with a certain amount of fluency, but the influence of the mother language, the mother tongue, is still noticeable. And that's fine. They're not being punished for it, because that's part of the learning progress. And that's what I really like. The positive look at what learners can already do, that's much more motivating. And you can see, even at this level, I can already do something with the language. So I really like that view. But we have to bear in mind the CFR isn't focusing on one language. It's not made for English, and it's not made for a certain context. So if you want to use it, let's say in Indonesia for higher education, for a foreign language like, or a lingua franca like English, You have to translate the very generic descriptors into your context. You are allowed to make it specific and change it and adapt it. So it's not a straitjacket, it doesn't give you the gold standard in language teaching. You have to adapt it for your context. And you're welcome to do that. So it's there for you to use it and to make it relevant. And that's just very quickly. You have the CEFR scales and descriptors. We're going to look at them in 1 second. They are a common framework. They provide common language, common reference criteria. They're very unspecific, very abstract, vague, general. They are not directly usable in assessment, and there are no rating scales. You have to develop your own rubrics. So what you do, you go into your local context, you analyze your context, look at your local needs, the specific language you want to assess, your students should be learning, specific learning context, and you come up with one possible interpretation of the CEFR for your context. So you can make it specific for your local needs. And then you go on to develop localized constructs, assessments, scales, rubrics. So what is it that constitutes writing in your context? You define what writing is, you define what your learners are able to do at the end of your studies, your courses, and then you come up with specific tasks relevant for your context. And what your learners can do in your context, in the wording, it will be different from the CEFR scales. But that's fine. As long as you can transparently show, this is my interpretation of the CEFR and this is the original CEFR. That's fine. You're allowed to make it specific. And the big external international certificates, they are kind of unspecific, generic. Oops. All right, here we go. And if you develop a local exam for your languages center, that will be localized assessment. It will differ, but that's fine. It's allowed to differ. And here we go back. The CEFR can help you look at your curriculum, inform your formative ongoing assessment. It can inform peer and self-assessment. You can use the scales for that. It can inform summative assessment at the end of the course. And it also informs the external big certificates. All right, one more thing, and then we go into the companion volume. Now the CEFR has been published in 2001. That's a long, long time ago. The world has moved on. A lot of online communication is taking place. You said you had students write on a computer. When the CEFR was first released, that was not yet the case. So the Council of Europe realized we need an update. And the update is called the companion volume, CD, I call it. And in the companion volume, you find all the original scales of the CEFR. And it's seen as a complement to the CEFR. Some of the scales have been updated. And there are a lot of new descriptors. Now we look at mediation, plurilingual, pluricultural competence. And it's a huge document. It's got 200 whatever pages. We're going to jump into it. I think you downloaded it all. You've got a link. And we look at what writing is, so that we get a bit of an idea of this instrument. And it also has a short rationale for each scale. It explains the thinking behind the categorization. And what I like most about the new thinking is we used to have these steps of the increasing levels of competence. But now people talk about concentric circles. And I like that better. You start somewhere with a little bit of competence. It gradually widens. You know more and you know how to do it better. And I like this picture of the, you can hardly see it here, the picture of the concentric circles, better than this levels going up. This is a nicer picture, and you find that also on the homepage of the CEFR and its companion volume. So this is a way of growing. Now, shall we go into the companion volume? Let's explore that together. I'll sit down. Excuse me for not seeing you properly. If you open the companion volume document, you can see it, but I can't. That's interesting now. How do I do that? All right, I'll work here. So this is, it should look like this. Have you all got this document? Yes. Let's scroll together. I could try maybe we do it this way. I see, let's duplicate. That's it. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Cool. All right. So this is what the document looks like. It's got 235 pages. Surely we're not going to go through that today. But we'll pick a few scales and look at them so that you get an idea what the CFR is, and then we go into developing writing tasks. So if we scroll down a little bit, we find the content, hopefully, somewhere soon. Here. So you get a few pages on the key aspects of the CFR. You get a mini introduction in the CFR to read at your leisure. If you're interested, then there is information about the update project, how the CFR was updated in 2018. And then we go into the CFR illustrative descriptor scales. And this is where the 6 levels come in and the different descriptions come in. And we have reception, which we ignore today. You can look at it whenever you like. We have got production. And here we come with a written production. We have a scale on creative writing, a scale on written reports and essays. Shall we look at creative writing? Yeah? Yeah. So let's go to page 76. This is what you find there. Creative writings, personal, imaginative expression, key concepts, aspects described from simple everyday information, types of texts, it could be diaries, biographies, simple poems, descriptions and imaginative texts. And it could go from simple words to clear connected texts to following established conventions. And this is what you said in the beginning. You guide your students from topic sentences, paragraphs, to a whole essay. So the CFR does the same, so to speak. And it could go from basic vocabulary to an assured personal natural style. And this is the scale creative writing, and you'll see the CFR starts with A1 at the bottom. So the scales always start at the bottom and you read them from the bottom upwards. So at A1, the blue language is taken from the original CFR. And anything in black is updated. So at A1, our students can write simple phrases and sentences, where they live, what they do. At A2, they can already write a simple series of phrases and sentences, short imaginary biographies, simple poems. Very, very short and brief. And then you see the A2 plus level. This is above the white line, so this is the upper end of A2. They can write everyday aspects of the environment, job, study experience in linked sentences. So at A2, the upper level, they can already link sentences. At B1, they can write straightforward detailed descriptions, and they can clearly signal chronological sequence in narrative text. So they can tell you a little narrative of what they did the other day. If we then go to B2, they can write clear detailed descriptions on a variety of subjects. They can write a review of a film, a book, or a play. And it moves on and on and on until we come to the uppermost level, can write clear, smoothly flowing, engaging stories and descriptions of experience in a style appropriate to the genre adopted. So you can see the progression from a lower level to an ever higher level. Now, take 5 minutes or so with your neighbors. Do you want to discuss with your neighbors for a few minutes? We're going to develop writing tasks. supposed to be a workshop. I've talked enough now. So, get together in small groups and discuss with your neighbors what assessment purpose are you focusing on. Think of this one. So, is it summative? Is it formative? What assessment purpose do you want to focus on? And then decide which level. Is it beginning learners, or are they already far up in their proficiency? Decide on a level, decide on a purpose, decide on a level, and then go into these scales, either creative writing, or you can look at reports and essays. Look through these two scales. What is it that you want to assess? Okay? Pick a purpose and pick a group of students, decide on their level and decide on, okay, what kind of writing do I want to assess? Take a few minutes to discuss, and then we go into how do we develop writing tasks that operationalize what you picked. Okay? Let's take a few minutes.
Before we move on to the levels, what It's more argumentative. It's more a bit.
So argumentative usually has been academic then.
Preparation to academic, but still this is general. For example, they have to teach something. Show the standard or find that more start with a phrase. Start with 5. So only 5 paragraphs. Just write then they have to start with 5 literary review. Like really accepting. But this one only essays, but they have to find 1 or 2 articles to support their arguments.
Our article sounds like this one. Actually, I gave them by for example, what argument I gave this one this about composition topic, right? And then I asked them things about the poetry. Later on, the end product is to write something opposing the writers.
Students in mind, we have their level in mind, and we know the construct, what exactly do we want to assess. Write an essay listing disadvantages and advantages, reading the text, summarizing the key points. This group here who had A2, what did you choose? What descriptor? What do you choose?
B1.
Oh, you B1. What did you choose? What descriptor? Can narrate a story. Excellent. So we will have lots of different writing tasks in a minute. Now before we go into actually developing the tasks, I want to take you on a little journey on the nature of assessment tasks. Because I heard lots of you saying, well, we want them to write a paragraph. And I just said, the CFR doesn't think in paragraphs. The CFR thinks in authentic tasks. So we're going to look into real-world writing tasks. Because normally nobody tells us, now sit down, write a topic statement and a paragraph. That's not an authentic task. What are the purposes in real life? When do you write? What are you writing for? You take notes when you listen to a lecture. You write an email to your friends, what you're going to do on the weekend, to your boss. Cecilia wrote a lot of emails to me and I wrote a lot of emails to her, organizing our stay here. What else do you do? Writing proposals, exactly. Abstracts. Reports. Do you have to write reports? Yes. What else do we do when we write? Who writes shopping lists? Sometimes. I wrote a list of words I wanted to learn in Bahasa Indonesia and I came not very far. And when I think of them, they're all gone again. I know terima kasih. And I should know a lot more, so I wrote a list, which I try and memorize every morning, but I'm not getting very far. So, who writes diaries? I do sometimes. Who writes paragraphs? We write in paragraphs, yes, but that's not the purpose of writing. So sometimes what the textbooks suggest has nothing to do with authentic writing tasks. And I want you to bridge this gap, because it's not a task to tell my students write a paragraph. What for? Who's going to read it? Why should I write a paragraph? So we need to think of the audience. Who's going to read it? What's the communicative purpose? What's an authentic situation in which you write a paragraph? So I want you to kind of leave behind the textbooks and enter thinking in kind of real-world tasks. What is it that your students should be able to do? And the CEFR thinks in similar lines. It describes like the learners can write a short diary entry, they can write a report, they can write a film review. So the CEFR lists authentic tasks. But the CEFR doesn't talk about assessment. So we may have to bridge the gap between the real world out there your pedagogical purposes, and it's perfectly fine to teach your students, we need a thesis statement, we need to develop a paragraph, that's perfectly fine. But maybe we need to come up with authentic assessment tasks where the students apply their knowledge about how to write a paragraph in a real task. So we have different contexts. We have the pedagogical context, we have the world out there for which we want to prepare our students, and we want the assessment to make the students apply the pedagogical knowledge in order to master an authentic task. Does that make sense? So let's see how we can bring that all together. Let's look at, no, we don't need that one, we've gone through that. Writing task development. And I have to thank my colleagues, Carol Spöttl and other. We had an EALTA summer school. We also do summer schools and winter schools. And we prepared a lot of materials in 2016, so I copied a few things from there. But I was part of the team, so I copied myself here. And you find the whole summer school materials online when you Google for EALTA resources summer school. It's all available, so you are welcome to browse there and get a bit more input on writing development, speaking assessment, writing rubrics. It's all out there. And one thing we always said is pedagogical tasks are not assessment tasks. That's what I just tried to outline. What you teach in the classroom builds up knowledge and awareness, but in assessment, when it's performance-based, the students should apply their knowledge. They should know, they should show what they can do with them. Now, what do we know about tasks? That's what I just said. They are performance-based and valid if they reflect authentic, real-world tasks. What do we do in the real world? And if our students are supposed to be able to take notes in a lecture, what would be the assessment task? How would you assess that? Any idea? Have a quick chat with your neighbor. The aim of my teaching is my students should be able to follow a lecture in English and take notes of the most important points. How can I assess whether my students can do that? I have 10 minutes time to assess that. Have a quick chat with your neighbor. How can you assess that? assess in 10 minutes whether the students are able to follow a lecture and take notes of the most important points. Any ideas? Yeah, does that tell me whether they can take notes? But that still requires that they read the question. But yeah,
I usually ask my student, I tell my student how to do like clustering, yeah, mind mapping, etc. And then so that they will know how to get the main idea and also the major supporting points in their mapping. It is the
so you ask them to map. And what do they map? Yes, please.
I think that when in note taking, that we should be having those how to understand and how to get notes. So, for example, it should not be a language or expressions for example, okay, now I think the first thing that the center does is introducing, right, and then after that, giving the main points. So they should know the key expressions, so that they'll be able to, okay, this is about this, and these are the main aims, and these are the main items. They have to be able to catch that, and for that reason, they should be able to understand keys. Okay, so after this, the lecturer is going to give reasons, is going to point out the aims.
So let's assume we have taught all this in class. This is a final exam. So, would you give them a video of a lecture? 5 minutes? A recording, yeah. We have a video recording of a lecture. 5 minutes. And the lecturer, you just take a snippet of a lecture. And we assume we have taught the language and the topic is chosen right, all fine. What about the task? I give the students the instruction. Listen to the following lecture about the best teaching methodology. Write down the main points from the lecture. Full stop. But if my teaching aim was to assess whether the students can listen to a lecture and take notes, why would I want them to summarize? That's a different learning outcome. If I want to find out whether the students can summarize the lecture, then the summarization task is a valid assessment. If I want to find out whether my students can take notes, summarization would not be valid, because that's a different learning outcome. So that's what I mean by valid assessment. I need to know what I want to assess. And if it's not taking, then I have to ask the students to take notes, full stop. And I can give them a structured handout where I say, okay, the 3 main teaching principles, characteristics of my learner, important features that the teacher should bear in mind. So I can give them guidelines on a handout, so I guide them towards what they should take notes on, like at the B1 level. At the B2 level, I may not give them anything. I may just tell them, listen to the lecture, take notes on the main points. Because what I've taught in class is, they know how to listen out for the main points, they know how to process the text, they know how to differentiate the main idea from supporting details, and I have taught them that they only write down the main ideas. And then, it's a valid assessment if I just tell them, listen to the lecture, write down the main points. If my aim is to teach them to write a summary, then I give them a text or a lecture, and what would be the instructions? Summarize the lecture. Because for a summary you want full sentences. It should be a coherent text. Note-taking? Do they need to write full sentences in note-taking?
No.
Exactly. So different skills. And that's why it's so important that you define specifically your learning outcomes and what it is you want to assess, and you only assess this. And you let the students know what you're going to assess. And this is what I mean by authentic real-world situations. And if your learning outcome is note-taking, then you assess it. And there was a very valid question in the beginning, but isn't it listening? And I said, yes, it is. It's integrated. So note-taking can also be used as a form to assess listening comprehension. But you could also argue, well, note-taking is a kind of written output. So basically, note-taking of a lecture is an integrated way of assessing listening comprehension via written output. So you can either use it for listening, you can use it for integrated writing, depends on how you want to conceptualize it. Both possible. Okay? So what I want you to do today is develop an authentic real-world task. We go away from the textbook paragraph writing towards what is it that your students should be able to do out there in the real world. What do you want to prepare your students for? They could write emails, book reviews, they could write a summary, all is possible. But it should be a real world task. What else do we have to bear in mind? So you want a task that elicits the targeted construct. If we want to assess note-taking, we don't ask them to write a summary. If we want them to write a summary, we have to give them a summarization task. And then the purpose is they should solve the problem or solve the task. So something they have to produce. Find out what the main aspects of the lecture are. Write a book review. Invite somebody, apologize to somebody, write an application letter, develop a proposal, write an abstract. So something out there in the real world that they should be able to master, and they show you in the assessment that they are able to master it. And of course it should be aligned to teaching and learning goals. You can't assess something which you haven't taught before. That would not be fair. So when you now go into developing the writing task, we assume you have taught students the necessary skills. Otherwise it would not be fair. And that's what are your learning outcomes and what are the relevant descriptors. That's what you just did in the first group work. You picked a descriptor. Can write a summary of an academic text. Can write an essay, a report listing advantages and disadvantages. These are your learning outcomes taken from the CEFR. And we assume you have taught these. The students know how to do it, if they have been in class and if they have studied. And of course it needs to be doable within the expected ability range. That's why I asked you, which level do you think your students are? What level do you want to assess? That should be matching. If your students are at A1 and you give them a B1 task, what will happen? What will happen with a student who is at A1? If you give me the task that I should write an email to Cecilia in Indonesian, what will happen? How many words will I write? Ibu Cecilia.
Terima kasih.
Bye-bye. It will be very short because it's outside my ability range. I cannot do it. So it has to be matched. Okay, what else do we need? Yeah, it should be meaningful for our test takers. We had a discussion yesterday about a textbook where a textbook for a high school was dealing with campus life. Now, senior high school students, what are they supposed to do with campus life? It should be meaningful for them and their world and their experience. All right, now, let's see whether we need 20 minutes, maybe not. Look at the CEFR descriptors you have chosen. What kind of writing should your students be able to do in the real world? So we go away from the textbook paragraph writing towards the real world. What kind of real world situations can you think of where your students are supposed to write and list the advantages and disadvantages. What's the real world situations? Where would I have to do it? And what writing prompts and contexts should your students be able to react to? I think that's important for that group who said they should summarize an academic text. Are there situations where they should answer an email they have gotten, react to something, respond to something? What kind of output should your students be able to do? Is it simple words and phrases, because they're still at A1, A2? Is it a coherent paragraph? Is it a coherent text, an argumentative structure? And what text types? What genres? And what audience? And also think of the role of linguistic knowledge. What kind of vocabulary, what range do you expect, how accurate should it be, do you allow errors to happen, because they're still at A2? What role plays orthography? What is acceptable? What errors are still acceptable? You can have a look into the companion volume for this. If you search in the companion volume for linguistic competences, you will find scales for grammar range and accuracy, vocabulary range and accuracy, so you can have a look what a CEFR thinks. And you can see whether you think the same or you are allowed to think differently. You don't have to adopt what the CEFR says. You can have your own approach. And finally, what do you count as successful completion of the task? When is it successfully completed, accomplished? And what assessment criteria? Take maybe 10 minutes. See how far you get. Take 10 minutes to make the construct you've chosen, the CEFR descriptors, make them meaningful. Start turning them into an authentic writing situation. And think of assessment criteria that tell you, have my students completed the task? Have they achieved the communicative goal? Okay? Have a discussion, maybe maximum 10 minutes. I think that should be fine.
So it's going to be a comparison.
How are you getting on? So you don't have to develop the actual task yet. I'm still guiding towards thinking, okay, what role, what authentic situation could you think of? What role does any input maybe have? What do you expect your students to do? We will develop the task right at the end. But you don't have to write it. Just outline the context. Your experience. An opinion essay? Yes. Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. I've seen that. Cool, excellent. And you, yeah, excellent, excellent. So that's the preparation. Cool. So we come to the prompt in a minute. Super. Excellent. How is it going here? Yeah. And who is the audience? Who do I have the right for? Ah, so the academic counselor needs to know. Ah, that's good. So it's an authentic situation. Excellent. Cool. Give reasons, give opinions. Excellent. That's good. Excellent. Cool. That's a communicative message. That's good. Excellent. Cool. We come to the task in a minute. And just make sure that we are on the same page. How is it going? Yeah. Are you're further than you should be. Excellent. You already done the task. That comes later. These aspects. And we look at the kind of writing and the audience. For whom do I write? Why would that fellow be interested?
Because everyone, especially those who don't understand, will face this problem.
But who is the audience? I would like you to go away from the essay question because you started with the end. The essay question comes right in the end. Forget that for the moment. Go back to looking at these questions, answer these questions, because only if you know what kind of writing, why, what is the authentic situation, the audience, then it makes sense to develop a prompt. The prompt essay question is the very last we do. So start first thinking, who is interested, who's the audience, what kind of writing? So these questions explain. Why would it be important to write this essay for yourself? Would it not be better to write to the So think of an authentic writing context, authentic writing situation, and then we go and look at the topic as a subject. So don't ever use this question. First answer. So you prepare them. That's cool. And did you find the scale? Yeah, exactly. Excellent. Nice. Good. Excellent. Here we go. So you found the right scale, and you thought basically prepared and so you will be the audience. Yeah. Cool. Excellent.
Summarizing.
Have you read, understand, paraphrase? Yes. Summarize. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Structured language content. Cool. Excellent. So we come to the task in a minute. How are you going? How is it going? If you want to go through the writing task. No, we do it in a minute. Step by step. The writing task is very simple. Because I have to write sentences, I have to use variables. How is it going on here? How are you doing? Excellent. That's good. Excellent. Great. Yeah, so we're guiding them when you're teaching towards writing a story. Simple, but so your criteria of completion is understanding. It does not be perfect. There can be errors, but it should be understanding. Cool. Excellent. Good. We come to the task in a minute. So I'll just go through and then we go on how we write a class. All right. Yes, sure. You could say So they say so the writing skills as part of the application.
You can use some
So this is an authentic requirement. Excellent. So you take an authentic task. It's quite a high level, I guess. Argumentative essay for the purpose of convincing your new employer that you are the person. Cool. Excellent. Yeah. So we come to the task in a minute. That's cool. Excellent. So, are you fine as well? So I've seen a lot of authentic situations. Great. Excellent work. We had posts on Instagram, blogs. We had an argumentative essay for the work application. We had preparing students for their thesis by writing a summary. What else do we have here? We had loads of things. Yeah. This group, they have to, the existing students or students who are already here have to write an introduction for the freshmen. There is loads of different authentic tasks out there. Great. So, you see, I gradually come towards the prompt. The prompt is the very last thing I do. First, we thought of our learning outcomes. We looked at a level. We picked descriptors. Now we're thinking of authentic situations, audience. What is the expected outcome? We had things from properly developed summary, an argumentative essay with pros and cons, to an understandable block on a low level. Just understandable, doesn't have to be perfect. So you're thinking along the right lines, and now we go into how do we develop a writing prompt, a writing task. We have a few more things to think of, and then you can get creative. So, instructions. We need to give the students instructions. They need to know what to do. They need to be clear, short, and concise. They should be accessible for the target group, so it should be real, easy language. They should be able to understand what they're supposed to do. Give the situation, the one you've just developed. That's why I asked you to think of an authentic situation. Tell them the goal. Post a full description on Instagram and give them the audience. This needs to be stated in the instructions. Why am I writing? What am I supposed to write? And who is the audience? Give them limitations, maybe regarding the content, the length, the time. How much do they have to produce? How long should it be? How much time do they have? Let the students know. Is it just one paragraph? Is it a brief postcard? Is it a poster? We had a poster as well, I just remember. Is it a long essay? What do you expect? Give them enough information in the instructions, but no redundancies. Be short and concise. And mind, all text that you provide in the instructions can be lifted and used. So that can work for or against you. Just bear that in mind. And I'll give you a handout in a minute with all this on, so don't worry. It's all on the handout. Topics. They should be of potential interest. But from what I've heard so far, this was all highly relevant and it should be of interest for your students. If you're not sure, you can trial. Ask your students what they want to write about. Ask them for feedback on your topics, whether they're interesting. Then they should be consistent with your curricular goals, selected on the basis of pedagogical principles, and maybe if you adopt the CEFR, consistent with the CEFR. Now I guess this is the same everywhere in the world, I hope, maybe not, but normally you avoid topics which could be potentially controversial or affect the candidate's performance. There could be gender biased topics. If you write about cars, the girls may not really want to write about it. Depends on what's going on. There may be taboo topics. Religion, politics, war, certain illnesses, death. It depends on the culture you're in. But you are much more aware and familiar with what is taboo in Indonesia than I am. I'm more familiar with what is taboo in Germany. It may not be the same, but be aware that not everything is suitable for a test. If it's a test, the students may already be very apprehensive. If you give them some topic which is really critical, they may not perform the best. And also avoid topics that are difficult to assess. Poems. How on earth are we going to assess a poem? That's fine for the creative writing class, but maybe not for a test. So this is also on your handout in a minute. One more slide and then you can go off and get creative. So, difficulty determining factors. We have students here at the A1, A2 level up to the higher B2 level, so you have to think of difficulty determining characteristics. What makes a task difficult and easy? Now, what we know from the literature, the more familiar the students are with the topic, the content, the task, the text type, the genre, the easier it gets. But we guess this is a given because you have taught them. They are familiar with this. You control this. Then the number of elements to address. The more things they have to think of, the more complex it gets, the more difficult it gets. Content, characters, relationships, cognitive operations and processing demands, reasoning, interpretation, inference, and organizing, transforming. The higher the cognitive operations get, the more demanding it is. Task distance, here and now, if it's like with the freshmen, that's right out of their life. That's much easier as if you're going to ask them to write an abstract essay on some philosophical questions. That's not right there, here, but it's out there, up in the abstract, really. That's more complex. Something personal is easier to address than something unknown. If you give them an abstract text to read on something they're not familiar with, this will be much more difficult. Abstractness. The more abstract, the more complex. Degree of precision. Make it as precise as possible so the students know what to do. Otherwise, you introduce difficulties that you don't want to introduce. If the poor students don't know what to do, they can't show you what they can do in writing. Linguistic complexity. If you give them a prompt, if you give them an academic text to summarize, that has to be at the right level as well. Otherwise, it may be too difficult. And then length, time, stakes, and amount of control also impact the difficulty. The more they have to write in a short time, the more difficult it is. So think of that as well. And the layout. Make it a nice layout. So this is all I have. We have a handout here. And now take about 20-30 minutes. Oh, thank you, that's lovely. And you, in your groups now, develop the writing prompt. And you've seen it's only now that we develop the writing prompt. You have discussed the student group, the level, what CEFR descriptor you want to focus on. You looked at the situation, the audience. You looked at your expected outcome, the topic, and now develop the instruction. Think of giving clear instructions, concise, state the audience, the situation, what is expected to write. Think of the level of your students. How much input do you want to give? How much guidance do they need? On a higher level, they need less guidance. On the lower level, they need more guidance. And take, let's say, half an hour, 20 minutes to develop the writing task. And once you're happy with the writing task in your group, we will share with each other. And we will give feedback to each other. And I'm here to go around. Raise your hand if you need any help, any input. Here I come. The language of the instructions, yes. Because it also depends very much on your context, because In Germany, there are operators that can do, but in other contexts, this may be different. But I would say the language of the instructions you give should reflect the instructions you give themselves. So that it's not familiar with the page. So if you say, give your opinion, write an argument, all right, have fun. That is a challenge if there is no definition. There is not, but I want to so they need a way to approach this. I know this is not a very fun but once you come there, so that they are aware of it. And I do with my dance. My love was to learn Master in Indonesia. A long time until I could write these exercises. I have a rare test, so what is your feeling about but as long as you really don't start the day,
And then here, 5% here.
Thank you.
the time is they go. Also think of the situation, the audience, the question they're writing. Why would I write it? Where they share, or maybe a student wiki, or we have a learning platform where we have example procedures. So if in the course my teaching they use the answers, I actually ask them to summarize what is their opinion, and they will put it on the learning platform, and other students will give feedback. So what you can do.
Some newspapers have
so that could actually be write a response in the opinion pages. And when you're done, right, lay the task on a piece of paper, maybe you can select the text on the maybe, and then we work with the others, and they will do the task. Well, if you have a piece of paper, you could just write the task, and maybe we find the task online, and the others because we can't keep How is it going here?
I usually throw,
that looks good. So what we then do is swap with the other group, and they have to actually write this task and maybe whether it's doable. And for yourself, you could now write it like it's what learning outcome. So if you go back to the CEFR, which of the held blue statements is targeting and which yeah, exactly. For yourself. So the task is what we swap with the other group, and for yourself you write down the answer. Excellent. Exactly. Yeah. You can also use two. If you have like you take a bit of this and a bit of that, that's fine. You don't have to have the whole. So, but refer to the CEFR. What do you actually put into practice? Cool. Excellent. There are scales in the companion volume on letter writing, so you could go to these scales. That's fine. Letter writing, there are scales. You have to find this, I don't know where it is. But there are actually what I'm trying is if they write to the rector, they most likely will write a letter to you. No, that's fine. No, that's fine. You must. Well, then you have to change the order. Why would I write an essay? But you can as well use a letter, that's fine. So if you go back to the CV and you go up to You have to search where it is. No, there is a scale on letter writing. I just don't know where it is. So you go. Yeah. And then if you go further down, there maybe is go further down. There is one on letter writing. Correspondence. Here you go. So you're welcome to choose that. You haven't looked at it yet, but you're welcome. So you don't have to change that, but you just change the learning outcomes. Yeah, exactly. So if the audience is the lecturer, most likely it will be a letter. And then you use, then your learning outcome is write a letter to an official person stating your opinion. Excellent. Yeah, then it works fine. And one thing is the task, where in the task you try and have everything here in the instructions, and then for yourself, you answer all these questions. So we will stop the task later, and you have to give feedback to the other group, and then they have to match whether you find, I'll explain it later, but for yourself, you answer all these questions, and also which scale it is and which level. Super, excellent. How is it going here? So we know the audience, it's an authentic situation, give clear details on what they're supposed to like, and with a word limit, you could also tell the time limit, how much time do you think they need. So this is great. So you have the task, which we will swap with the other group in a minute, and for yourself, now try and define and specify what level is it and which CEFR descriptor is that, most likely. So that you can specify, okay, I am operationalizing this English descriptor from this scale at this level. So that information you keep to yourself, and you see whether the other group sees it the same way. So we're going to validate each other's tasks. So for yourself, specify what you wanted to operationalize, and this you give to the other group. And they have to try it out. So that's why you may want to give a time limit, maybe not too long. But we still have an hour, so we'll be good. How is it going on here? Oh yeah! Oh cool! Nice, so you have a nice audience, 40 minutes and the time. Excellent, cool. That's good. So this essay, write it on a piece of paper, so they can copy with another group. And for yourself, for this question, also say which of the CEFR descriptors are you actually operationalizing? What level do you think this is? Because the other group will validate it and tell you their opinion, and then you can see whether it's cool, excellent. This is very nice. Now you have a real audience, a real purpose. Perfect. Cool. Excellent. How is it going on here? So you give them enough guidance so they know what to do. Excellent. You tell them how much time, how many words, and unite the situation. Excellent. So this should work well. And what you now can do for yourself Okay, excellent. How much time do students have to be there? This is great. This you share with another group. So put it over in a document where you can share it with another group and advertise it. And so you tell and what happened. And then see what the other group gives you in terms of feedback. Because we have a lot of comments, a lot of control. So you know what you take away from the students has to show how much they can do. All the students' competence to show. End of report. See that. And for yourself, fine or specify which is very but don't tell the other group, because the other group has to how is it going here?
International conference. And they go
Choose one. Choose a and decide on which task. Because the others have nearly all finished. So what I want is to decide one task and the rest of the task is the label. So I hope three tasks has really made by okay? Because we're gonna in a few minutes we want to swap. So that the other doesn't really write something. Cool.